What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be discussing the temples at Baiae, or as it's more commonly known as, the real-life entrance to the underworld. Other than that, I got 2 new parts of the Ancient Mysteries Iceberg dropping, so if you haven't checked out those other parts, I'll try to make sure I link them. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe and all that other YouTube stuff, and we're just going to get right into it. So, the narrow entrance to the tunnel complex at Baiae is easy to miss amid the ruins of a Greek temple and a large Roman bath complex. The interim at Baiae is proved difficult to explore. A sliver of tunnel, obviously ancient and man-made, disappeared into a hillside close to the ruins of a temple. The first curious onlookers who peered their heads into the cramped entrance discovered a pitch-black passageway that was uncomfortably hot, reeked in fumes, and basically they only penetrated a few feet into the interior before beating a hasty retreat. There the mystery rested, and it was not revived until the site came to the attention of Robert Paget in the early 1960s. Paget was not a professional archaeologist. He was a Briton who worked at a nearby naval base, lived in Baiae, and excavated mostly as a hobby. As such, his theories need to be viewed with extreme caution, okay? It is worth noting that when the academic papers of the Britain School at Rome agreed to publish the results of a decade or more that he and an American colleague named Keith Jones spent digging in the tunnel, a firm distinction was drawn between the school's endorsement of a straightforward description of the findings and its refusal to pass comment on the theories that basically Paget came up with to explain his perplexing discoveries. The pair claimed to have stumbled across nothing less than the real-life entrance to the underworld. Paget was one of a handful of men who still hoped to find the Cave of Cybele, described by Virgil, and it was this obsession that made him willing to risk the inhospitable interior. He and Jones pressed their way through a narrow opening and found themselves inside a high but narrow tunnel, 8 feet tall but just 21 inches wide. The temperature inside was uncomfortable but bearable, and although the airless interior was still tinged with volcanic fumes, the two pressed on into a passage that they claimed had probably not been entered for more than 2,000 years. Following the tunnel downward, Paget and Jones calculated that it only fell 10 feet in the first 400 feet of its length before terminating in a solid wall of rubble that blocked the way. But even with the scanty evidence the two men managed to gather during this early phase of their investigation, this persuaded them that it was worth going on. For one thing, the sheer amount of soil that had been hauled into the depths suggested a considerable degree of organization. Years later, when the excavation of the tunnel was complete, it was estimated that 700 cubic yards of rubble and about 30,000 man journeys was required to fill this. Another thing was using a compass. Paget determined that the terrace where the tunnel system began was oriented towards the midsummer rise, and hence the solstice, while the mysterious passage itself ran exactly east to west and thus on the equinoctial sunrise line. That suggested it served some ritual purpose. It took Paget and Jones, working in difficult conditions with a small group of volunteers, the better part of a decade to clear and explore what turned out to be a highly ambitious tunnel system. Its ceremonial functions seemed to be confirmed by the existence of a huge number of niches for oil lamps. They occurred every yard in the tunnel's lower levels, far more frequently than it would have been required merely to provide illumination, basically to light up the whole place. There was a lot more candles than it would have been needed to. The builders had also been giving great thought to the layout of the complex, which seemed to have been designed to conceal its mysteries. Within the proportion of the tunnels choked by rubble, Paget and Jones found hidden behind a S-bend a second blockage. This, the explorers discovered, marked the place where the two tunnels actually converged. Basing his thinking on the remains of some ancient pivots, Paget suggested that this had been the spot that one time harbored a concealed door, basically. When it was swung closed, this would have masked the entrance to the second tunnel that acted as a shortcut to the lower levels. Open partially, it could be used, the explorer suggested, so this is what Paget is suggesting, as a remarkably effective ventilation system. Hot, ventilated air would be sucked out of the tunnel complex at ceiling level, which currents of cooling air from the surface were constantly drawn among the floor. So basically, he was thinking that it was like a ventilation system if you kind of slightly open the door, or if you close the door, it was basically just a complete block. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be able to see into this other tunnel system if you blocked this door. So that was their whole thinking right there. But only when the men went deeper into the hillside did the greatest mystery of the tunnels reveal itself. There, hidden at the bottom of a much steeper passage and behind a second S-bend that prevented anyone approaching from seeing it until the final moment, ran an underground stream, a small landing stage projected out of the sulfurous waters, which ran from left to right across the tunnel and disappeared into the darkness. The river itself was hot to the touch. In places, it even approached boiling point. Conditions at this low point in the tunnel complex certainly were stingent. The temperature had risen to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The air stank of sulfur. It was a relief to force a way across the stream and up a steep ascending passage on the other side, which eventually opened up into an antechamber, oriented this time to the helical sunset that Paget dubbed the Hidden Sanctuary. From there, more and more hidden staircases ascended to the surface to emerge behind the ruins of the water tanks that had fed the spas of basically the ancient like Roman bathhouses. Now, even though the Roman school that they actually like did the investigation with, even though they agreed on the discoveries and they disagreed with their theories, personally, to be honest, their theory kind of makes a little bit of sense. Like, just wait until you hear it and then tell me it doesn't kind of make sense, you know what I mean? So, the two men proposed that the tunnel system had been constructed by priests to mimic a visit to the Greeks' mythical underworld. In this interpretation, the stream represented the fabled river Styx, which the dead had to cross in order to enter Hades. And basically, a small boat, the explorers speculate, would have been waiting at the landing strip in order to ferry the initiates across. Once they got across, they're assuming that they would have walked up the stairs into the hidden little sanctuary, and they would have met up with someone. They're not really sure who. Paget thought that it would have been a priestess posing as a Cumean Sibyl, and this reason is basically why he called the actual complex itself the Antrim of Initiation. The tunnels then, in Paget's view also, might have been constructed to allow priests to persuade their patrons or even just wealthy people into thinking that they had traveled through the underworld and basically came out. So basically, probably to rob people is what they're assuming, just talking about drugging people or taking like really tired people, bringing them through this cave, because I mean, with the super hot temperatures and the volcanic kind of fumes in the air, you could definitely assume, especially the boiling hot water, you can kind of see where they're getting this idea from. Although none of this was ever proven, and this is all to be taken with a huge grain of salt, you know what I mean? Like the school that he even did this through, they only agreed with the findings. They did not agree with any of this stuff he's saying right here. So in favor of this argument, Paget went on, was the careful planning of the tunnels. The dividing of the ways with its hidden door would have allowed a party of priests and the Cumean Sibyl to perhaps quickly access the hidden sanctuary, and encounter with this river Styx would have been enhanced by the way the tunnels S-bend construction concealed its presence of an actual room to the new initiates. The system furthermore closely matched ancient myths of visiting the underworld. In Virgil's Aeneid, for instance, the hero Aeneas crosses the Styx only once on his journey to the underground, emerging from Hades by an alternate route. The tunnel complex at Baiae seemed to have been constructed to allow just such a journey, and Virgil, in Paget's argument, had lived nearby and might have himself been an initiate in Baiae's mysteries. So I don't know if Paget is kind of claiming that Virgil got finessed in some way. That's how I'm taking it, is that he's thinking, oh, this dude just got finessed and got walked through here. You never even came back over the river Styx, you know what I mean? If you got brought out a separate entrance or a separate exit, and that's exactly how this whole antrim or tunnel system is kind of built. Is he just assuming that Virgil got finessed and then wrote a whole story about it? Dating the construction of the complex was a greater challenge. The explorers found little evidence inside the tunnels that might point to the identity of the builders, just a mason's plumb bob in one of the niches and some ancient graffiti. But working on the assumption that the passages had formed part of the surrounding temple complex, they concluded that the best they could date would be the late Archaic period, around 550 BC, at pretty much the same time that the Cumean Sibyl was said to have been living. If so, the complex was almost certainly the work of the Greek colonists of Cumaea itself. And as for when the tunnels had been blocked up, that Paget thought must have taken place after Virgil's time, like exploring there and being there, during the early imperial period of Roman history. But who exactly ordered the work, he could never answer this. In time, Paget and Jones solved at least some of the great Antrim's mysteries. In 1965, they persuaded a friend, Colonel David Lewis of the U.S. Army, and his son to investigate the Styx for them using scuba apparatus. The two divers followed the streams into a tunnel dramatically deepened and discovered the source of the mysterious heat, two springs of boiling water superheated by the volcanic chambers of the Plethysrium fields. Whether Paget's and Jones' elaborate theories are correct remains a matter of debate. That the tunnel complex serves some ritual purpose can hardly be doubted if the explorers' compass bearings are correct, and the specifics of its remarkable construction seem to support much of what Paget says. One alternative theory, which also makes a ton of sense, basically says that the tunnels were once part of a system designed to supply hot, mineral-rich water to the bathhouses above, which honestly makes perfect sense to me. But the only thing that doesn't account for it is the S-bend and the hidden room. So basically that's kind of like where the debate is. Anyways, the central question may well be whether it's possible to see Paget's channel of boiling water deep underground as anything other than a deliberate representation of one of the fabled rivers of the underground. If not the Styx itself, then perhaps the Phlegethon, the mythical river of fire that, in Dante's Inferno, boils the souls of the departed. Historians of the ancient world do not dispute the powerful priests that were fully capable of mounting elaborate deceptions, and a recent geological report on the far better known Greek oracle site Delphi demonstrated that fissures in the rocks nearby brought intoxicating and anesthetic gases to the surface at the spot, suggesting that it may have been selected to basically be a kind of ruse, almost the same exact thing as this spot. And basically they think that they were finessing people out there too with just using these minerals and rocks, where these priests basically had the knowledge that this wasn't some otherworldly stuff, but they were just more so taking advantage of people and deceiving them, you know what I mean? Anyways, there's still a ton of mysteries about the Great Atrium. One of the biggest questions is how ancient builders working with primitive tools at the end of the Bronze Age could possibly have known of the existence of the river Styx, much less excavated a tunnel that so neatly intercepted it. There was no trace of a boiling river at the surface, and it was not until the 1970s, after Paget's death, that his collaborators finally discovered by injecting colored dyes into the water that it flows into the sea miles away on the northern side of Cape Messeno. And basically, yeah, not much has happened really since he died and since they were investigating it. To be honest, him investigating it really didn't do anything for the place. It didn't attract more tourists or anything. Nobody really seemed to care. And basically, they really don't even exploit the fact that people think that it is the real entrance to the underground. They kind of just don't even talk about it. And yeah, it's kind of like a dead tourist spot, to be honest with you. But I thought it was super interesting because I kind of believe it. I think that, especially back in the day when it wasn't so easy to tell scams and stuff like that, especially because nowadays, internet, bro, you know what I mean? You can tell a scam a mile away. Back then, you could scam anybody, I feel like. They had the snake oil salesman, they had everything, bro. So I think you could definitely have finessed a couple people by doing this into thinking, yo, you went through the underworld, so you better make sure you get right with God, because you better, you know what I mean? Anyways, that's about all. If you guys stuck around this long, I appreciate it, for real. Make sure that y'all like, subscribe. New videos coming out next week, hopefully this week. Whenever you see this, I don't even know. I'm recording this on Sunday, so hopefully you see it soon enough. But anyways, make sure y'all stay safe, stay dangerous, get laid, and I'll see y'all soon.